Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer, and this is the first episode of Strange Mosaic for 2022. I wasn't sure if I was going to continue doing it this year or if I was going to retire it, but I think I'm going to revamp it, and I will give the sort of explanation of what that is going to be in just a few minutes. But before I do that, I want to give a few announcements, and then we'll get on with the show. I want to remind everybody that on Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern or 6 Central, I do a live stream over on Locals. It is free to listen to the live stream if you just become a member of the community with your email address. And if you want to chat, then you need to be a supporter over there. If you'd like a promo code for a free month over there, it's going to be in the description box below, and that will grant you like admittance to all the content I put out for a month over there, the supporter content I put out for a month, as well as invitations to Conspiracy Cocktail and our monthly Patron group chat. So that will be in the description box. We're recording this show on Wednesday. What's today's date? The 12th? Wednesday, the 12th, but it will be going out Friday, the 14th. The live stream will be tonight, and that code to join over on Locals, if you like, will be there.
Not tonight, it's Friday night.
But it'll be Friday when they see this show.
Yeah.
So great. Yeah. So for them, it'll be tonight.
Sorry.
And we're going to be doing something a little different. Conspiracy Cocktail is this weekend. It's on Saturday night. If you've never joined us there, please consider doing so. We're going to be doing something a little different than we've done there before. And it sort of fell into place in this really synchronistic way, and I'm excited about it. So if you decide to go for the free month on Locals, it'll get you into that as well. Or you can just become a supporter on Patreon or Locals at the $10 level. And we have tons of fun over there. It's really cool. So those are the announcements. And now about Strange Mosaic. For a long time, like even back when I was working with Randy, he and I both used to talk to each other about how sometimes we were sort of tired of the standard interview paradigm. But of course, you don't want to say, well, I'm not doing interviews anymore, because as soon as you say that, somebody comes out with like some new work that you want to interview them on, or some idea that is interesting and whatnot. But I don't want to feel restricted to, and obviously I have some shows I do that aren't interviews at all, but I don't want to feel restricted to that on this show. So going forward in 2022, if I have somebody on the show for the first time, it may be more of an interview because I'm getting to know them, you're getting to know them, or whatnot. Or if somebody has a recent work that just came out, and maybe they've been a guest before, but there's some, new work out, then I'll do more of an interview. But other than that, whenever there's a returning guest, it's going to be more of a back and forth, more of just a conversation, like a meeting of the minds or a melding of the minds, however you choose to see that. I may subtitle the show with something like that at some point, or sort of switch it up a little bit. But that's what this show is going to be, at least in 2022. I like to, kind of make my concepts to be able to morph and change over time. So that's the direction for right now. And now on with the show. I'm super glad to have my good friend, Daniel Berdie, the communist in California, back to join us. Laura and I lovingly call him Berdie, and we hope you do too. And maybe we'll talk about whether birdies are real or not a little bit more today. I forgot to add that to the list of things we could possibly talk about. He always has interesting posts and interesting videos, and your presentation style is very, very different than mine, like the way you show up. And I'm kind of fascinated by people who are very different than me, but we have similar interests, right? And so I enjoy the conversations with you, and I'm glad to have you as the first guest on the show of the year. Welcome back. Nice to see you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And guys, just before we get started here, go over and subscribe to his channel. He doesn't have nearly as many subscribers as he should. You are one of the most interesting and down to earth and sort of like, I don't know how to say it right, but like caring and communicative with your followers, people on YouTube that I'm aware of. I think more people should follow you. So we'll link to your channel down below. I think you've changed it. I think now it's Dreams and the Cosmic Trip. Is that what it is now? It used to be Dreams and other stuff, but you did change it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I realized how absurd that other name sounds. So Cosmic Trip sounds a little more interesting.
It definitely sounds a little more acidic, at least, right?
Yeah.
There you go. All right. So, the first thing I thought maybe that we could talk about, and like I said, anything that you find that comes up during the course of the show that you want to ask me about or chat about? Like, we're sort of laying out the model of how I want to do things here. But the first thing is you and I both had some sort of plague or some sort of weird illness in the last few weeks. And I thought I'd kind of hear what that was like for you. And I tell you what it was like for me, and we can kind of chat about it, because I think it's a lot of people are experiencing that. And it's this one's a little different.
It's different. It's not like anything I've ever had before. Really hard to describe strange symptoms, especially the first day or two. I was really delirious, and my mind wasn't working at all. I couldn't think or concentrate, and I still can't. Like for the last 2-3 weeks, I'm having a really hard time concentrating and focusing. But a lot more than that, I had this really powerful, like, electrical sensation throughout my body. So it started today is Wednesday, so it started not this Saturday, but the Saturday prior to that. So I guess almost 2 weeks. And this, like, just surge of electricity throughout my body. It was really intense too, like this tingling sensation everywhere. And even it was so weird. And basically there were moments, especially that Saturday and Sunday, where I felt like I was going to faint or pass out, where I was like really low on breath. I couldn't catch my breath, couldn't breathe right. I had this really bad back pain. I mean, really bad. When I say, okay, so I assumed that it was from from my cardio and stuff. I'm like, okay, maybe I just pulled a muscle or something. But I realized that it wasn't from that, especially since it went away like a couple of days later. But the pain was so bad. It was like a 7 out of 10 scale. Like, I couldn't focus on anything except that pain. And I don't know what it was or why it was there. I don't think it was from any exercise or anything though, but apparently it's one of the symptoms of the thing. I don't know, from what I read about, which is really strange.
Hi, Lisa.
Oh, you see Lisa?
I see Lisa in the background. Lisa's his cat.
Yeah, she's hanging out with us because she wants to join the conversation, right? Yep.
Yeah, the cats usually do. Yep.
Right on. But yeah, I mean, since then I just have a persistent, like, pneumonia-like cough that just won't go away.
Have you ever had pneumonia before? Have you had pneumonia before? Okay.
I have. In 2019, I had it. Actually, I had very similar symptoms to what later came out to be the thing. In October of 2019, I had that before it even started in Wuhan and stuff.
Okay, wow. So this is interesting. Like, there's quite a bit of similarities here for you as to what's been going on for us. So I didn't know that about you for October 2019. So you're even sooner, okay, than Laura and I were. So what happened for us in 2019 was we both traveled at Thanksgiving separately to see our families, Laura in Iowa and me in Boston, right?
Okay.
But we both left from LAX at the same time. We went on our trips, and we were both gone for 5 days. And both of us on about the 4th day started to feel a little bit unwell, right? And by the time we got back to Los Angeles, it was pretty much fully set in. And we were, it kind of came and went in waves, but we were really sick for somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks, right? And this was a really serious sort of congestion and head cold and chest cold or chest something. And the amount of, like, really green snot that looked like aliens and crazy stuff or whatever coming out, and fatigue, like, and just, you'd feel better for a couple of days and then worse and better and worse. And it really took about 6 weeks to shake the whole thing. And then, by somewhere a week or two into January, it was gone. And then we started to hear the reports from China, but we didn't even make a connection then. We were still just thinking that was like a bad cold we had, right?
I didn't make the connection at all. Yeah, no, not whatsoever.
So it's interesting what you're saying, because so I'm aware that like some people say the original breakout in the United States was in Boston, and that it was in either November or December, right? But we couldn't have gotten it in Boston because she didn't go to Boston. She went to Iowa, and we came down with it on the same day in separate places. So we had to have gotten it in Los Angeles.
Right.
Right. And airports seem like the perfect place for stuff to start to spread and be moved into other locations. Yeah. And if you look at the timing on like those military games and things like that were going on in China that people say it originally came from, if they are coming from China to the United States, they're going to arrive in Los Angeles and then go on to other destinations, not arrive in the East Coast, right? And so sometime in October, they would arrive in Southern California probably, and then spread out across the United States from there, and things start to develop from that place. But if you think about it, airports are almost hermetically sealed, and they're not filtered in the same way airplanes are, right? And so that sort of begins that thing. So that's interesting that you had it at the same time. I do feel, was this, whatever you had the last few weeks, was this the first time you've had anything since then?
Well, yeah, besides from like, basic standard, flus and stuff. But yeah, one thing I forgot to mention was I did get all kinds of tests done and x-rays in 2019. And it kind of came back inconclusive. The doctor literally said unknown form of pneumonia or something.
Oh, that's interesting, because that's what they were literally calling it in China originally, was like an unknown pneumonia.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, so we didn't have, this was the first time either of us have been sick really, really. Well, she had some little thing when we were visiting her family over the summer, but it seemed more like emotional, like she was having trouble dealing with her family, and I didn't catch it though, whatever it was. Right. So for 2 years I had nothing. And I'm the kind of person that usually gets like some little cold or flu at some point in the winter or whatever, but I hadn't had anything in 2 years. And I was almost getting to the point where I was feeling sort of like, ironclad, like I wasn't going to get stuff. So I thought, well, whatever I had, if it was the very, very original something of something, conferred, I don't even know if I think how I feel about what it actually is, but that's besides the point. Like I had this broad immunity, right? And I seemed to be traveling all over the place, going everywhere, no problem. And then this little fucker this time like snuck up on us, right? And this was something completely different. Is it your experience that this is entirely different than the thing before? Or is there some similarity for you?
The one in 2019?
And now, the one then and now.
I would say this is a little bit different because it was more, I don't know how to explain it. This one felt more like a personal attack. I don't know how to put it.
Yeah.
That one felt like a disease, and this one feels like something more personal. Like that's the only way I can explain it.
So I agree with you, right? Like, in fact, during the days when I was like, not quite sure if I was sick or what was going on, like, some people reached out to me and they're like, hey, like people I know who are psychics or remote viewers or whatever, they're like, hey, Emily, I think something weird might be going on for you. And that kind of along the lines of what you're saying. And I'm not a person who tends to think that way. Right.
Me too. Me too, though. Yeah.
Right.
So I never considered myself like a targeted individual or anything like that. Like maybe I had some incidents that I might think that I could have been, but it's not something that's like been on my mind over the years or something I've been concerned about in particular. So yeah, that's interesting.
Okay. So one of the things that I noticed about this one, right, is that it was this one was just, I had a little bit of congestion around this area, low level, that lasted for a long time, but never was really serious. No green snot, nothing like that. What this one mostly consisted of was extreme fatigue. Yeah. And then for the few days that were the worst, like a really, really serious headache that felt like when I had meningitis. And then for the few weeks leading up to it, until I got the headache, and then once the headache broke, it sort of was gone. This sort of strange psychological stuff that like you described feeling like delirious and unable to concentrate. For me, I just didn't feel like myself. I felt self-doubt. I felt anxious, different, like I'm hyper all the time, but that doesn't necessarily translate to feeling anxious inside. Right.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And it felt like when I had parasites. I don't know if you've ever had parasites, but if you have parasites that cross the blood-brain barrier, they start to take over your thinking process and make your brain not function as well and make you just all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm like, dude, what the hell is this? It's like meningitis and parasites sort of all wrapped up into a special little packet and beamed at us from whatever it is, right? So have you ever had parasites? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, when I was like 18, I drank some tainted water or some water that wasn't filtered from Florida canals, which you don't want to do, especially the water over there. And yeah, I got extremely violently ill with parasites. So yeah, that was the only time that I could verify that I had, but I'm sure I've had other times too from stuff I ate that I couldn't confirm.
Yeah.
So that was a long time ago. I was 18. Yeah. So.
And then the other thing, and I don't know, like I've heard a couple people throughout the course of the whole thing for the last 2 years talk about for maybe some delirium or some hallucinations. I don't know what your sort of blood type. I know you're obviously from the former Soviet Union, but I know that there's ethnicities in the former Soviet Union that have some Asian or Caucasus kind of blood or different kinds of things. And that it does seem to be that people with Asian ethnicity maybe are having a response to it that leans toward some of the delirium. So I don't know if that could have been at play for you or what your blood type is also. That seems to be, blood type has different.
I can't remember exactly what blood type I have. I do know it's one of the more rare types though. So I got to look. Actually, they want me to do some blood tests pretty soon. So I'll find out eventually within the next couple of months.
Yeah.
But I do remember it wasn't like a very common one.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, cool. Well, I just kind of wanted to document that and see but it's interesting that we both had it around the same time, both times. Yeah. So that gives me some new ideas and suspicions, but, all right. So then we're early in the year here and, you had a post wanting to know how people are feeling about 2022 so far. So I want to know how you're feeling about it.
Oh, wow. I don't know. I'm like on the fence because I'm kind of 50-50 right now. Basically, it's really hard to determine what's in the minds of these psychopaths and these leaders. So on one hand, like for example, like if we're going to talk about the Putin NATO talks, on one hand, I'm thinking that maybe Putin has like these grandiose ideas of his head of reestablishing the Soviet Union and making, Russia great again, basically, right? So if he's in that thought process, then we're definitely kind of in a dangerous place, I think, because then he's willing to do like absurd things to get to that goal. And it's kind of similar with China and Taiwan. I think it's the same sort of idea where, yes, China, we're going to unify with Taiwan and be number one, and we'll do whatever it takes to do it. It's like these kind of themes have been common floating around last few months. And I'm starting to think like, okay, it really depends. So if they give in, if that is what they're thinking, like these leaders, and they give in to those thoughts and they start attacking countries, then 2022 will be an absolutely terrible year, no doubt. If not, if something happens to where, let's wait it out a little bit, or more mind games like they always do, then I kind of see it playing out pretty similar to last year. So I'm kind of 50-50 right now. Is it the great year of iPad Go 2? I don't know yet. I would say there's a pretty 50% chance that it is. There's a 50% chance that it's not. It kind of depends what they choose to do. And then there's also the very real possibility of some kind of curveball or a false flag that they would throw in that neither Putin or China is responsible for at all, but that kind of triggers everything. So that's another possibility too. So it's kind of like we're in the danger zone right now, kind of waiting to see what happens, I think.
So I like to tease you about your hat, right? But you're not a communist. I just tease you. So I'm assuming that you're not fond of the idea of a return of the Soviet Union, at least not in the format that it was before, right?
Probably not. I mean, it's a lot of people would love that, though. That's the thing. Like, the thing is that people living back then, they didn't even know a lot of the stuff that was going on. They didn't know that people were being taken out in the middle of the night and taken to gulags and murdered. And it was really well hidden, basically. So a lot of people had this false idea that they were living in this utopia, at least for a while, until like, the 80s, when real things started to really fall apart. But yeah, no, I'm not fond of such an idea whatsoever. No, I don't think that's good at all. Especially the former Soviet states, they would not want that at all. I don't think they would want any part of that, especially places that hate Russia, like Estonia and Latvia and Ukraine. Those places are not friends. So
yeah. I didn't, when I asked you about 2022, that wasn't where I expected you to start, but since you did, right? What do you think about what just happened in Kazakhstan?
Oh, that was a total psyop, I think. That was a CIA operation. They just basically wanted to give Russia a headache, I think. They had all kinds of foreign operatives come in and start things. I'm sure there was some underlying issues that did kind of push it over the edge. Like, yeah, there probably were issues with, really high gas prices, and that's probably all true. I'm not saying it's not, but they brought someone in to like really push it over the edge. I think they tried to start like another Ukrainian type 2014 revolution going. And I think there's definitely, they just try to make a headache for Putin, basically, just to slap him around a little bit. That's my opinion. I don't know. I have no facts to back that up. So
what's interesting about that is that I was reading an article this morning, right? Yeah. And, I've become largely like immune or just jaded, and I don't even pay attention to too many of these things anymore, because once you've gone down like the Syria rabbit hole and the Ukraine rabbit hole and the former Yugoslavia rabbit hole, all we all find the same fingerprints all over it. So I just don't even really look that often anymore. But I looked it up a little bit the other day, and I saw kind of exactly sort of what you're saying, right? And so there's the possibility that it was just to give Putin a little headache and for it not to really be a big thing. Or there's the possibility that they were trying to go full bore color revolution, but somehow Putin has become wise to the Soros color revolution cartel, and he just shut that down faster that, he was, kind of thing. And so, I'm not saying that in praise necessarily of Putin. Like, it's weird how so many people here who are very anti the left or the Joe Biden or the corrupt Democrats are somehow have become turned into, like, oh, Putin's a good leader. He's keeping social justice warrior stuff out and transgenderism out. So therefore he's good. He's still a politician, and he still has dictatorial.
He's still a former KGB agent.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it is a probably at least one bonus point for the world if somebody was able to, knock out one of Soros's color revolutions pretty quickly. So, with all of these things, there's upsides and downsides. Let me ask you, how old were you when your family moved here again?
Oh, I was really young. I was like 2.
Okay, so you've never been to Kazakhstan?
No, I've been back there a couple of times for long periods of time. Actually, I've actually been to Crimea, all over Ukraine, a lot of places in Russia that my family's from, St. Petersburg, Moscow. So I'm familiar with the area for sure. Yeah.
I've always been like oddly, well, not always, but for, in recent years, been oddly fascinated with Kazakhstan, particularly with Astana. And I even did 2 shows about Astana last year, or as they like to say, Nur Sultan or Astana or whatever. because it's a very unusual, very, very unusual place.
It is.
I think it's like one of the I think it's like a model for completely smart and self-aware environments, right? Like in terms of
Pretty
everything
much.
is technology, and even what things people think are just like build, like normal stuff. Everything is technology. Everything is interacting with each other. But I also think there's an element to the city that exists sort of outside of time, or it really is in the future, but it's just being reflected back to us right now.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. It kind of has that vibe to it, and it looks, it's built for the future. At least that's what it looks like for sure. Yeah, and with the bizarre architecture, supposedly that lake they have in the city center that's in the shape of a local or the national bird, but I think that's a phoenix bird, rising from the ashes, because it's facing a new world, right? So they have a globe that's coming out, and I kind of see that as a new world because it's like on a pedestal basically, and there's two pillars like on either side. Those could be the pillars of Jachin and Boaz, or a new world emerging, like I don't know, possibly, but it's a strange place. It's such a strange place. Yeah.
We did I did a couple of shows on it with the Crimmies my friends, the Crimmies last year. And we did sort of a full sort of sacred geometry breakdown of this entire plot here. Right.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's definitely, I mean, there's some fascinating things to this city, and it's one of these things like, wow, it really is something to marvel at. And like, if we're looking at this stuff and thinking that this is just like a city with things as we used to think cities were made of, then we're insane. Or maybe we really need to shift our thinking and go, what have these things been all along? And is it just obvious now? Right? Like, things that we've just thought of as like, okay, this is a building, it's made of bricks and whatever, but like, what else, like, why are they so intent on like not tearing down original brick buildings? What do those bricks hold inside of them? Is there some like store of knowledge there that if you destroy them, then, that's gone, aside from just, oh, this is a historical house, but is there something actually stored in there? Right. So
an energy contained in the, or some kind of recording, maybe.
Yeah.
That only very high frequency technology can pick up on, possibly.
Totally. 100%. That's exactly what I'm thinking of. Right. And we've watched over the years, like, have you ever seen one of those movies where somebody will go like a spy or something, and there'll be like a hole in a brick wall, and they'll roll up a piece of paper and hide it in there, and someone will come and retrieve it? I feel like that's a nod. Like, that's not really how they do it, but that's sort of a nod at the idea that these bricks are actually full of information.
They are. They definitely are. Yeah. Yeah. And then, you just showed that city, and I totally forgot about the pyramid too.
Yep.
With a black capstone on top. So strange.
Right. It looks very similar to the pyramid in Memphis, right?
In Tennessee, right? Yeah.
Memphis, and there's the one, and then there's also obviously the Luxor in Las Vegas, right? So yeah, it's very similar.
I stayed at the Luxor before, actually.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of Vegas, so I don't have very good opinions about it.
It's an interesting spot, right? Like, when I go there, I'm not interested in gambling at all. And I don't like going for dance music in nightclubs. Like, I like underground warehouse parties. That doesn't really exist there. So that's kind of what you do when you go to Vegas, is like gamble and club. But I do like fancy restaurants and Cirque du Soleil. So if my dad,
me too. Yeah.
Right. If my dad invites me and he's paying, I'll take him up on the fancy restaurants and Cirque du Soleil. I go to sleep early. He and his girlfriend stay up all night gambling. I don't do any of that. So I catch up on my sleep. I eat good stuff. I see that, right? So, but yes, I'm not really a fan either. But the Luxor is quite interesting. When I was living in Tucson when the Luxor originally opened back in the 90s, and for the first, I don't remember if it was just a month or a year or whatever, but that capstone that they have up there that shoots the light up into the sky, when they first opened it, they made it even stronger and brighter than it normally is. And there were nights where you could see it all the way from Tucson shining in the sky.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
I mean, that's like 300 or 400 miles away.
Yeah. Right. It was only for a period of time, but I just remember driving one night and trying to, like, I was coming home from somewhere, and like where I lived was like in the northwestern part of Tucson. And so Las Vegas would be north and west from there as well. So I'm driving home and I see that there's this light in the sky that looks like it's coming from the ground, not from the sky, but it's going high up in the sky. And you know, couldn't really figure out what it was. And then somehow either, you know, a couple of years later, right, or early in the early 2000s or whatever, I was listening to, what's his name? Behold the Pale Horse.
Bell?
No, Behold the Pale Horse. William
Cooper.
Bill Cooper. And he did his Mystery Babylon series where he was talking about that. And he starts talking about that it was this, and you could see it all the way from hundreds of miles away. I'm like, well, that's what I was seeing, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know it's, I think it's still considered like the brightest light in the world that can be seen from space, or something like that. Yeah. So it's still super bright.
Yeah.
And are they sending a message? Like, are they using that building to send a message to whatever deity is up there?
Right.
Hey, here we are, come back down. Or I don't know, just speculating, but it could be.
It'd be interesting to monitor it, like if you were living there, like see if there's like a sort of a pulsing that happens with it, where it's not like it's changing, right, kind of thing, or where if there are some nights where it's brighter than others, or do they ever have it doing a different, slightly different tone or color than just pure white light, right? And to see, because that would be that. I mean, I think there's a variety of ways that they're communicating with larger beings or larger information systems up above, right? Like, I don't know if you've heard me talk about cities as QR codes at all.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So and by that, there's two things going on. Like, if you look at a city block, it looks very similar to a QR code, right? And obviously, when the more stuff that's in a city, the more details that's going to be packed into each city block. And then there's like the larger city that could be, you know, there could be a big QR code and then smaller ones that are each blocks. But what I started to discover was there are also QR codes on top of some buildings, right? That like literally they've put QR codes there, and it's like, what is people going to scan the top of the building to get their menu for like, it's just what's going on here, right? But you think about it, you or I, we go to our local coffee shop, we get there, there's like the counter that has the QR code there, and you put your phone over it, and then we know what the menu is. Are there giants, or are there, like, you know, we see these clouds that look like they might have an enormous structure or UFO inside of it? Are they extracting information about what's going on down below through some of these codes, right, that are atop the building, right?
Yes. I think that is spot on. I think that is very much happening. And it's something that obviously the public wouldn't have a clue about or even know how to process. But that's interesting how maybe these are like information gathering centers.
Right.
I like especially like the light on that pyramid. And instead of scanning an entire region, for example, they could just plop that light, and they know everything that's going on within a huge radius around there just by that light alone. Interesting.
Right. I mean, you think about, like, okay, just think for a second about the Luxor Hotel. Let's just focus on the Luxor and all the things that go on there. Right. So obviously there's gambling. There's a lot of credit cards being used, a lot of cell phones being used, and some people are spending a lot of money gambling. Others are spending a lot of money at the bar. Others are spending a lot of money on indulging in fancy meals. Some are probably paying for hookers with that, There are, if you go into these places, some people are going to see what's his name, the Chris Angel show at Luxor. So this leans towards magic and the esoteric. Other people are going to Cirque du Soleil. It's connected to Mandalay Bay and a few others. So, so those things are all sort of connected. But if you go down to the floor in some of these places, and because the Luxor has this occulted esoteric theme, you find palm readers, fortune tellers, psychics, all of this different kind of stuff. There's so many collection points for information, and everything you do in that hotel is on that swipe card that they give you, or you can charge it up for gambling. You can charge it up, swiping. What if that information is literally like, there's like pipelines or fiber optic cables before, this was built in the 90s. Now we just have energy flying around everywhere with information in it, but it's all being channeled to the top of that pyramid. It's collected in the capstone, and it's literally blasted up, and somebody with their device or their spaceship hovers over it and just.
That is something. And yes, I have no doubt that it's happening. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I actually meant to go here after we talked about the plague. Well, there was one other thing I meant to ask you about your plague, and then I wanted to go to the next thing. So I'm just going to circle back to that, and then we'll leave some of the other things maybe for the second hour. And I meant to hit back on your back pain that you couldn't understand. Okay. Yeah. So I have been suffering from a back pain that I'm unable to understand for a couple of years now. Oh, wow. Which it comes, it goes, like it's shifted from side to side. It's moved more into the hips. I've been to all kinds of people. No one can figure out what's going on. And it's, other than in the very beginning, it's not really bad enough to stop me from doing what I want to do. Like some days I can't, but then 2 days later I can. And then, it's kind of back and forth. And I think in the beginning it was just, it was a shocking new level of pain, and it took me a while to adjust to it. Right. But it's very strange. There's some very unusual qualities to it. And at the beginning of this bout of the plague, you can come back, honey. It was worse than I think it had almost ever been for a couple of days. And Laura was ready to kill me or kick me out of the place because I wouldn't stop complaining. And I wasn't complaining necessarily because I wanted her to do anything about it, or even because it hurt so bad, but it was because I was in shock and amazement at how bad it felt. Like it was like, this is a new level of like bodily information or something. It was so strange. I could do nothing. I couldn't concentrate on anything else because I could do nothing but talk about it because it was so fascinating.
Exactly. Yeah. Same thing happened to me. It was the same sort of idea where I've never felt anything like it. It was really strange. It wasn't a dull pain. It wasn't a sharp pain. It was almost like a phantom pain, I guess.
Did it have this quality where you felt like, because this is how it's always been for me, but it was even more so during these few days, where it felt like, ooh, it would feel really good if somebody would squeeze me there or push or massage, but then they go to do it and you don't feel anything. There's like, it doesn't relieve it. It's like they're not even touching you.
That's so strange that we had something so similar happen. Wow. That is really weird.
So I know another gentleman who I would classify as similar to us, but different, right? You and I are different, but there's some things in common. He also has some similarities, but some differences. And he has been going through something like that as well. And he and I got into a conversation about it, and we really agreed that there was almost a technological feel to the pain. Like it almost had like a metallic feel, or it felt like some sort of technology that was like being dialed up or dialed down or modulated in some way that was like very unusual.
Very unusual. Yes.
Yeah.
You described it perfectly. And I would add to that also the electrical sensations, which, keep in mind, I have had that before, like with certain illnesses, but not even close to this intense though. This was really like almost like radiating throughout my body.
When you were experiencing the electrical sensations, was it throughout your whole body, or was it in a particular spot?
It was everywhere, but it was especially prominent in my hands and feet.
Okay, I was going to ask you if it was emanating from a certain area. I have had that buzzing that emanates from the feet before, and then also
Yeah.
a lot of buzzing that emanates from like the shin area, right?
Yeah. And knees as well.
Yeah.
Knees as well, yeah.
And when it happens, like this is not, some people are just like, oh, maybe you just have like a muscle spasm or a tick. I'm like, nah, dude, this feels technological. This feels like a machine.
No, I've had plenty of muscle cramps and spasms and all kinds of stuff like that. It wasn't like that at all. No.
Yeah.
Weird.
All right. So this leads me now to your car, right? Because so the way that like this anomalous thing was going on in the body that there's not really an explanation for. Like I've been to all these specialists. You maybe haven't been to specialists because it was contained to a small period of time, but I think you know the sensation I'm talking about clearly by what we've been chatting about here. You have something going on with your car. I'm not clear on what the details are of that, but we have something very strange and car related going on as well that we can't seem to get to the bottom of. So I would like to hear some of the details of your situation, and then I'll tell you about ours.
Really straightforward issue. Just needed to replace the brakes and rotors, and I did. So I replaced the brake pads first because they said I don't need rotors, and the car starts, shaking, like when I'm on the road and when I'm braking. I'm like, dude, okay, they did a crappy job or something. I was kind of pissed. So I come back and they're like, okay, yeah, I guess we have to replace the rotors too. So I'm like, okay, they did, right? And I'm like, great, everything's fine now. And it drove fine for a while. Then it starts shaking again like crazy. And this is when it gets kind of weird, like legitimately weird when somebody tells me these words. I take it to the actual dealership, the Subaru dealership. And you probably know that the dealerships usually have the best mechanics.
Right.
They're the best of the best. And I take it there, and he calls me, and he literally says that he's never seen anything like this before. He says they can't figure out what's wrong with the car. They take it out on the freeway, and it's shaking. And it's braking and it's shaking, and they've taken it apart, and they don't know what's going on. So I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? And he's like, well, the only thing we can do is like, maybe put some lube on the brakes or grease or whatever and see what happens from there. But he said this is the first time this has ever happened where they haven't been able to figure out what the issue is. So I just ended up, picking up the car yesterday. Like, okay, well, I guess if it starts shaking again, I won't know what to do anymore, basically. So I just thought it was strange to hear that from somebody, from basically professionals, that they don't know what's going on.
I guess that's the difference between mechanics and doctors, right? Is the mechanic will know to tell you they don't know what's going on, and the doctor will pretend that they do, right? And tell you you're wrong or you're crazy or you have a psychiatric disorder if you can't, right?
Right.
So here's my question to you. Do you have any anomalous activities take place when you're in the car, this particular car? Have you had any strange phenomena with this car?
The only thing I've had was, I've had the sense of being watched in it, especially driving. Sometimes I take lonely country roads back home from work, and I feel like there's like somebody in the back seat sometimes, like a little bit of paranormal stuff. Yeah. And you're right. It is more prominent with this car than the other one, where I never noticed a single thing, or that's the extent of it though. Like I never overtly saw anything.
Right.
Like super unusual. Yeah.
So I was thinking, I don't know why this just came to me while you were talking. Are you familiar with John Titor, the whole John Titor narrative?
Yeah.
So remember,
the time traveler.
His device for time travel was in the trunk of his car.
Oh, really?
Right.
I did not know that. Okay.
Okay, so the way he described it is that there was some kind of box or something that was in the trunk of the car, and that traveling to different timelines was kind of like, the way to imagine it was that like different lanes on the freeway, and that this box helped him to make those sort of moves, right?
Interesting. Wow.
And so here we are. That was like in the earlier 2000s that he was talking to Art Bell and whatever, right? My guess would be at this point that it wouldn't be a large box in the back seat or the trunk, but it might be a small chip or device or something like that, frequency generator or something, that could be in the car. And like, without going into too much information, but I know that your work is in an arena that deals with like, certain kinds of realities and stuff like that, right? And so, and you obviously, you're the brave soul who doesn't mind recording your thoughts on reality while standing guard at the place that's probably creating the anomalies that you're speaking of, right? And so, I just, and then this car thing, right? Like, and I don't get any feelings like intuitively, like anyone's trying to harm you or hurt you, but you obviously have the mental capacity, the dexterity, sort of psychically based on the skillfulness which you have demonstrated in lucid dreaming and dream recall to be able, and this, particularly certain dreams that you've shared here before, to deal with the complications of moving through different realities and spaces, right? And so if they don't want to test something out on someone who's going to lose their shit and freak out, right? They want to test their shit on someone who might not even notice that well, based on the fact that they live in many realities all the time anyway, and just, be paying attention to hear if you report some strange Mandela effect or some little anomaly that would have been the slight change to the reality that you were used to, right? Yep. But that some of this may be being driven by whatever the anomaly is in your car.
Interesting. I like that. I like that very much. I'm gonna be meditating on that from now on. Yeah.
When I was little, I used to ride the bus from school to gymnastics, and on the way between the two, we passed a street where the house that the DeLorean that they used in Back to the Future was parked. And sometimes it would end up like riding next to us on the school bus, right? So I'm very familiar with the idea of like the car generating the time travel or whatever it is, right?
Right. Yeah, that is interesting that I didn't even think of Back to the Future, but then I'm like, oh, wait, duh. That's because it was in a car as well. Yeah, it's either in a car or like back in the day in a phone booth.
In a phone booth.
Yeah, right? What was that movie? Bill and Ted's Adventure. Right. Their time travel thing was in a phone booth. So either way, it's related to something electrical or energetic, right? Like a car. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously in the car with movement. So now I'm going to tell you what's going on here for us, and let's see what you can sort of make of this. So we have an office here in Austin that is not too far from where we live. But the office, like the building, doesn't have a parking lot, right? So we park in this garage of the apartment building on the next block over, right? We pay to park in the apartment building's garage. And there's a contract through the building that we rent an office from, and they give us, so we pay for parking. They gave us a key fob thing. And for the first few months we were working there, I was driving and we never had any trouble getting in and out. Then we got in a car accident, a very strange car accident, right? That forced us to have to get a new car. And it's a miracle that we got a new car during that period of time, because there's like a shortage, particularly a shortage on hybrids or whatever. But we ended up getting this kind of perfect car, right? And nobody can believe we got it, and we got it at a reasonable price, all this kind of thing, right? But ever since then, Laura mostly drives that car now because she's just a better driver than I am, right? But when she goes to the office by herself, the thing doesn't work. to get into the parking garage, right? Whenever I'm there, it works, but when I'm not there, it doesn't work. And
Not always. It's like 50% of the time.
50% of the time, but even like, right? Like, but often, I mean, for a while it was 100% of the time.
Yes.
For a while it was 100% of the time. And, you know, we're trying all kinds of metaphysical tricks now to play with it and whatever, right? So oftentimes what she would do is just take a card, go in and park, go to the office. And what they would do is they thought she was crazy. They were giving her a new key, a new opener every day. And the same thing was happening every time. And every time the person from the office would go over and try it, it would work. Every time I would go and try it, it would work. So like, she's starting to look a little crazy, like maybe you with your car or whatever it is, right? But you know, it's true. So today she goes to work and same thing happens, right? She can't get in. She takes a card. I'm like, she's like, what do I do? I don't want to go to Lynn. Lynn is the office manager at our building. She's like, I don't want to go there again. She thinks I'm fucking batshit crazy. And I'm like, you're batshit crazy, but that's not why. But I was like, okay, so just decide right now that just decide and sit only with the idea that when you leave, it's going to open, you know, and it worked on the way out and whatever. Right. But it's this odd phenomenon. And she just will stand there. I'm like, are you pushing the button wrong? Are you doing something? No, it's just like, it doesn't want to work for her. Right. There's like and again, we're in a car and now it's a car with like, this is a different, a battery in it. That's a hybrid battery. So we don't know like how certain people's systems interact with the electrical play. Right. And this is a different kind of hybrid than like the Prius. Right. The Prius builds its charge by when you brake. Right. That's how they build up the charge for the car to run without using a lot of gas. This car builds up its charge by when you're driving at a more accelerated speed. So it's like a different technology than most of the other hybrids that are on the road right now. Right.
Right.
And so I think as when we have like people who have sort of anomalous relationships with reality, right? People who are dreamers like you or travelers or psychics or, you know, hands-on instant healers or whatever, as we become more sort of entwined, and I don't necessarily mean implanted, although certainly that comes to mind as well, but just intertwined with the kinds of technologies we're using, I think some of these anomalies are going to arise, right?
Yeah,
that either the person is generating this phenomenon or, you know, obviously there's technologies that could be used to be playing around with things like we're talking about, like maybe in your case, but it is interesting, right? Like, and there's nothing more frustrating than I don't know what the problem is. I hope he didn't charge you.
No, actually, no, they didn't. No. So I'm glad. Yeah, it's all good. We'll see what happens from now on. So
Is your back feeling better?
yeah, no, it is. I haven't had it in a few days at all, like nothing going on at all whatsoever. Just a persistent.
Really low back, right? Like down in the lower pelvis.
Really low. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where the kidneys used to be before the Mandela.
That was going to be my next question. So like I've seen a lot of the, you know, the new anatomy of the human bodies. Like several years back, like probably around 2017 or something, I was seeing some of the things people were showing about that. And so I've wondered that same thing, if this is related to that. Like at the time that go ahead.
Yeah, possibly. That's a good way of looking at it. That my mom always seems to think that's what it is. She's like, oh, it's not your muscle, it's your kidneys. And she keeps telling me to take this vitamin and that vitamin. I'm like, I can't figure out why she keeps thinking it's my kidneys, because I don't think it is. But what if it is related to that anomaly or to that change? What if it is? Because I said it was like a phantom pain almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a phantom pain of where you feel like there used to be kidneys there.
Right. Yeah, it could be that. Like I used to get like kidney, not like I had a couple of like kidney or urinary tract infections, you know, but I would sometimes get that kidney pain when I used to do drugs. I've been clean for, you know, a long time, but you know, like that kind of phantom pain. The other thing, like, you know, the other thing is just, like there would also have to be, if our skeletal system has been restructured and it's caused kidneys and other organs to move around, like there would have to be a period of time where like, you know, like it's like not necessarily the right shape for the new place. Like it has to have time to sort of switch its shape. Like Laura's a pelvic floor therapist, so she deals with that area of the anatomy, right? And for some people, it's like everything is too compacted in there, and other people seem to have like a lot more space.
Right.
And things aren't so tight, right? So that, and then the other thing is like when I first started to see those new anatomies, like literally the same week like that Mandela effect came out, like I noticed I had like a piece of my skull missing, right? Like I used to wear this headband all the time, like a cloth headband. And all of a sudden one day I noticed that there was like an area where the headband wasn't touching my head. There was like a ton of space. It was like my side of my head had been dented in, right? It had never been like that before. I'm one of those people who like touches myself all the time and, you know, whatever. And so, you know, that was I started freaking out for like a little bit about that. And it seemed to sort of resolve itself over time. But I do think, you know, I've talked to a number of people who have anomalies going on with their body, you know, that don't make sense.
Right.
So, all right, so let's do this, Berdie. Let's move on over into the patron segment. I want to, you know, ask you a little bit about some topics that I hear you talking about on a regular basis that are not as much in my wheelhouse, so I'm not as informed about. And then if there's anything that you want to inquire of me, I'd love to sort of hear that. But before we move over to the patron segment, why don't you let people know like what you're up to, where they can find you, all that jazz.
Oh, you can just, go to my channel, Dreams in the Cosmic Trip, and talk to me there, and I'll respond to you. I always do. So that's about it.
All right, cool. So you guys can join us over at patreon.com/offplanetmedia or emilymoyer.locals.com. All the information and links you need will be down below. We'll see you on the other side.